dwelling. It is 31%, so it is less than a third. And it cannot have more than 2 bedrooms. You'll see that the design for the temporary apartment is for 1 bedroom, living room, kitchen, and bathroom. Those are the high points, at least, of the bylaw that I had summarized. There is a lot of detail in this.
Mr. O'Brien, do you have any follow-up questions to Mrs. McGettrick?
I do not, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. David, do you have any questions of the applicants of Mrs. McGettrick?
I do not at
Okay,
this time.
I don't have any questions at this time. Let's see if there's anybody present who wishes to speak in support of the special permit application and the variance. Yes, sir. Why don't you come on up here and make yourself comfortable so you're going to be in front of the microphone. Tell us your name and address, and we're delighted to hear from you.
Glad to. My name is Sean Fahey. I live at 202 Old Farm Road, Mr. Leonard. I wrote a letter of support.
You did.
I think you referenced my address as 17 Fox Hill. That happens to be the Chan's address.
I don't know. I may have.
That's okay. So I am an abutter, one of 2 abutters to the Chan's property. My rear property line is common with their side property line. I've met with Stan and Sasima, and they've explained their application for a variance and why. And I understand simply it's an administrative request in that the construction due to the parcel is by right. So I'm simply supporting their variance, their application, and hoping that the board will find in favor of them. I, like the other abutter, am probably most impacted by their project. I've had the good fortune of living in my home for 19 years, and it's a single-story house that's behind me. I am a 2-story house. I have a pool in my backyard, and I've had reasonable privacy with a single story. My neighbor previously was Joe Murphy, who happens to be here tonight. He was a wonderful neighbor, and it's been very quiet there for 2 years since the Chans bought it. But needless to say, I fully support the Chans and what they're doing here, and I hope the board will, favorably approve their request for a variance.
Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time and effort to come here tonight and speak in support of the application.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Come on up.
Joe Murphy, 20 Mountain Laurel Path.
Good. Welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Murphy. Delighted to hear from you.
I kind of know who you are because I was a treasurer at Indian Cliff for not a lot of years. Okay, but that's in the side. But I'm only here because I'm the former owner of this home that we're talking about. And I think I'd like to say, mainly, one thing mainly, I'm happy. They have done a nice job of taking care of the place. They're in the process of trying to do all this work. And I think it's something in their favor to say that they could have left the house, the grass grow and everything look awful because they're going to do a lot of work, and they have not. They've chosen to run the sprinkler system and to cut the grass, and plow the snow, and do all those things to make the place look nice, even though they intend to do a great big construction job. I think that's something in their favor. I think the neighborhood, will be in good condition because of people like them, that's all. That's mainly that's what I came for.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your coming. And
Thank you.
Good to see you again, Joe.
thanks, Mr. Murphy. Is there anybody else that'd like to be heard? Yes, sir.
Martin DiMatteo, 41 Fox Hill Lane, also in favor.
I'm sorry, what's the...
41.
41, thank you.
41.
41.
It looks like a significant improvement to the property that's there. Not that there's anything wrong with that property, but it would be even better. My only concerns coming here seemed to be addressed by special permit, that this not become a long-term apartment situation.
I think the bylaw provides that if the named occupants
Are the
are
only ones
out,
that cannot.
then within 60 days, it has to be converted to the previous use. And the applicants also have to, I believe, to certify under the bylaw on an annual basis, I believe, but I may be
That's
wrong
correct.
there.
No, that's correct.
To the building inspector that the parents are still residing there, and there are no third parties or fourth parties or other family members residing.
What happens if they don't?
Well, if they don't, the building inspector presumably would send them a note and ask for a report. More likely than not, if the neighbors saw people that they didn't recognize entering and appearing to reside in the residence, usually the building inspector would be given a call, and he'd conduct a site visit and certainly call the Chans and make sure that the particulars of the special permit are being scrupulously followed.
And if they were not?
Well, he could cease the temporary certificate of occupancy. He could withdraw that,
Yeah.
and then the building wouldn't be able to be used as an in-law apartment. If the Chans thought that the building inspector was misguided in his findings of fact, they'd have the right to come to the Board of Appeals and have an adjudicatory hearing on that.
Okay. Well, I think it's a significant improvement, so I don't know why you wouldn't be for it.
Well, I agree with you, and these in-law apartments, they're really closely regulated by the building inspector's office to make sure that there's no non-conformance or there's no abuse taking place of the process, particularly in a wonderful neighborhood like this is, and the substantial investment that they're making here.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Damati. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Is there anybody else who'd like to be heard?
Thank you.
No, there isn't. All right, so Mrs. McGettrick, do you have anything else you'd like to follow up on, or have you said your piece?
I've said my piece, except that I know the Chan's intention is to comply exactly with requirements of the bylaw. They've been really meticulous about reviewing it with me, and I have a lot of confidence in them. I hope the board has also had that impression from this hearing.
Right, so what we'll do is we'll end the evidence portion of the hearing, and we'll vote on this application, discuss it, and vote on it here and now. Mr. Deba, would you like to be heard?
I would, but for the time being, I would appreciate being able to defer. I haven't sat on one of these before, and I'd be interested to hear how you approach it.
Well, Mr. O'Brien has sat on many of these hearings, so why don't you give us the benefit of your wisdom?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the first thing I'd like to say is probably the most significant benefit to the neighborhood was when Mr. Murphy sold the building and moved out. Mr. Murphy and I served on together on the Housing Authority Commission a number of years ago, so I say that fully with tongue in cheek. Relative to these types of applications, we put through the ringer. This type of stuff was very controversial when it went through town meeting. There is a need in this community for these types of in-law apartments given our aging population, but we also wanted to be, as a community, very careful about allowing them. We don't want to have in place uncontrolled two families, having buildings, large or small, all of a sudden be turned into rental properties, etc. So this is one of the most detailed parts of the zoning bylaw, and there are very specific requirements which you, Mrs. McGettrick, was very kind to recite and go forward for the record and for the board. My impression of this application, as the prior applications, was, again, it was very well presented. I'm also impressed that the applicant here has literally bent over backwards, I think, in order to attempt to scrupulously comply with the provisions of the bylaw. And we like that. It gives us faith and comfort that on down the road that not only the provisions of the bylaw will be complied with, but the spirit of the bylaw will be complied with as well. So once you get over the hurdle, which I have gotten over the hurdle of whether or not the in-law apartment should be allowed at all, the second question comes to the issue of simultaneous construction. And it's not even a close call. I mean, as a member of this board, and I think my colleagues would agree with me, is that we're not going to make people do things twice. I mean, It's ridiculous, it's not practical. It's the reason why this Board of Appeals exists, is to deal with that type of situation so that we can put some common sense into the provisions of the bylaw. So I think that that's what, I think I'm prepared to support this. I think it meets the spirit as well as the letter of the bylaw, and I would be supportive of granting the special permit as well as granting the other relief needed in order to allow the simultaneous construction.
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I'll speak second since Mr. Daber is a little reticent tonight. I can say this, Mr. O'Brien is one of the few members of the Board of Appeals who could be elected to any public position, and to be elected to town meeting member is wonderful. His years of service on the board have been admirable, and he certainly knows, because of that experience at town meeting, the intent of the town meeting and the purposes of this bylaw, which I look at from a more abstract position. But I think Frank was right on the money, that the applicants, certainly this is a wonderful thing for the applicants to be able to have the parents there in this wonderful location. It's a great neighborhood. And I know that they'll scrupulously abide by all of the technicalities of the bylaw. And I agree with Frank. Mr. Prondak was exercising his discretion in somewhat of an ambiguous situation, and I think he felt that rather than leave it in an ambiguous state and have somebody challenge it after the construction had been done or after we approved the permit, and put the Chans in an untenable financial position and an untenable living condition, that it's better to face the issue right here and now and do it by reason of the variance. And I think that this is the type of, as Frank says, it's not only common sense, it's good judgment, and it's an appropriate award to grant the variance under these circumstances and not leave it to chance. So I'm delighted to vote in favor of this application. I know the type of difficulty you're going through with the construction process, and then to do the in-law apartment at the same time, it may magnify that, and so it's not an easy thing to do. But I think you'll weather the storm, and you'll have a magnificent house, and be able to take care of the parents in a beautiful, beautiful way. So I'm ready to enthusiastically endorse the application for relief that's being sought. Mr. Daber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Become less reticent now in the last few minutes listening to my colleagues here.
Well, Mr. Daber is also one of the few people that could be on the Board of Appeals that could be elected a town meeting member. Most of the other Board of Appeals members, they run and they lose. So why don't you vote?
I don't know about that. No, thank you. I agree wholeheartedly that that's a wonderful, to be able to have that for the family. And having, read through the bylaw, and it is so detailed, it really does strike a good balance, I think, between trying to make sure that it is temporary and yet providing this avenue for situations like yours. And I was very impressed, and Mr. O'Brien alluded to it, at how conversant you both seemed with the details of this, and really taking to heart and making sure that everything was complied with, and that's great. And I certainly think the standards for a special permit have been met, and I agree that, wholeheartedly that it makes sense to allow the construction to take place at the same time. So I am also in favor of granting the variance.
Okay, so all those in favor of granting the special permit and the requested variance, please say aye.
Aye.
Well, congratulations on your great victory tonight. You can thank Marion for a great presentation. We'll do our best to crank this out with some degree of dispatch so you won't be delayed forever.
Okay.
And obviously, if you have any technical questions about the bylaw, Mrs. McGettrick knows it as well as we do, or perhaps even better. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But,
Thank you very much.
Actually, I
Thank
do
you.
have one question. In the prior application, the applicant, when you mentioned that a letter will be sent out to, I think, abutters to let them know, or the appeal process, you'll be referencing the specific plan and the design. My one question is, Commissioner Prondak, given our timing for construction, at his suggestion, he said submit the plan for the house and also come before the Board of Appeals for the special permit. For the house plan, it would be with an empty space where the in-law would be, and then the plans that we've submitted before you would show what the in-law space would look like. My question is, the plan that you have, nothing has changed. Design-wise, everything looks the same, but the date. Because right now, the regular house plan is also being reviewed by Commissioner Prondak, and he did have some requests for additional documentation, not anything related to the in-law space or the design for the in-law space. So my question is, if you will be referencing the plan that you have, which is dated February 27th, 2015, Commissioner Prondak is currently reviewing the house plan. So I'm just not sure in terms of how that will be done. Do we just, once the appeal period for your approval has passed, do we submit the February 27th design to Commissioner Prondak to be integrated into the house plan?
Well, I think you deal with Joe on that issue. We're just concerned about the in-law apartment
Okay.
and not the overall project, except as part of the background. So
Okay.
Sure.
he probably would want a copy of the February 27th plan as part of his
Yes, which he has.
file. But in terms of the construction, you deal exclusively, we give Mr. Prondak a lot of liberty.
I think he probably anticipated, because he's the one who suggested that we do the process concurrently, so he will anticipate that we will be coming back to him.
When you write the permit and list the conditions, this is a common issue, actually. You reference usually the plans that are submitted to the
Right.
board. The permit or the variance, I'm speaking in general here, not just for this application, may not relate to all of the plans, but only relates to a certain aspect of the plans. And so the question has come up, this is just something to think about, years later, when you look at that condition, does that really mean someone has to come back to the board if anything in their plan changes? Or does it mean they have to come back to the board if what the permit was issued for changes? Well, there's certain language in some of the decisions that makes that clear. The permit, it could be an issue, it's something to think about when you write your decisions, that's all I can tell you. And this is a sort of an interesting example, because the building plans have been submitted, but may be revised at the request, not revised,
Not
but
revised,
additional
additional
detail may be
details.
added to them. You've received a plan for the house with and without the in-law apartment, and you're going to reference those. I think if you look at those plans, you'll see that they're not at a level of detail that most likely is going to be contradictory to anything else. So I don't think there's an issue, but it's just something to be clear about
I
when
think
you
what
write
we
a
do
decision.
is we like to invest substantial discretion in the building commissioner, and what we do generally, Mr. Chairman, correct me if I'm wrong, is we write language into variances and the special permits that the construction be in substantial conformance with the plans. Because we realize as construction goes along, we don't want to have someone have to come back to the Board of Appeals because a window needs to be moved or some minor architectural detail needs to be fixed. On the other hand, I can vividly recall one case where we issued a special permit and what was built was not what I approved. And that was not a happy day. So, Commissioner Prondak brought that to our attention, and I don't expect that that will be an issue here, but it's construction. Stuff changes. So, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I agree with
Yeah,
that. So
yeah.
with that having been said, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. So we have no further business. I suggest we adjourn.
All right, flip to this one?
So be it. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want me to do it?